A broken vase can never be mended, goes the famous saying, symbolizing irreversible harm or betrayal. A fragile vessel may be pieced back together, yet its cracks linger, forever altering its appearance and utility. This analogy hits close to home for survivors of intimate exploitation. Historically, our society has often tried to diminish the pain of such experiences to avoid causing discomfort to others. However, our culture and legal systems have evolved. Individuals who have suffered these indignities are now sharing their stories and receiving the support they need, propelled by dire incidents that could not be ignored. Among these is the tragic story of Antonia Barra from Chile, around which the entire national community rallied to ensure justice was served against her aggressor. The loss of the young woman became known on the evening of October 13, 2019. Her family could never have envisioned how that day would conclude. Her sister Carla, visiting their parents' home, went upstairs to say hello to Antonia, expecting a casual chat. However, finding her seemingly asleep, Carla chose not to disturb her and headed to the door. Before she could leave, she heard Antonia ask about their mother and request the light be turned off. After telling Carla she loved her, Antonia turned away. Maybe she's just tired or not in the mood, thought Carla. Little did she know, Antonia was grappling with harrowing thoughts that left her feeling there was only one way out from her profound distress. By 7 that evening, their mother, not hearing any response from Antonia's room, entered to find a harrowing scene. Her daughter was motionless, suspended above the floor. Marcella rushed to her, finding no signs of life. Overwhelmed by shock, she sought assistance from neighbors. The family friends helped take down the body and called for emergency services. Shortly afterward, Alejandro Barra addressed the media, vowing to uncover the root causes of his daughter's desperate act and to seek justice. Known for her vivacity and intelligence, it was clear that something significant had profoundly impacted Antonia. The autopsy confirmed self-strangulation as the cause of death. The case required immediate action. Not waiting for official inquiries, the parents initiated their own investigation. Private detectives meticulously pieced together the last days of Antonia's life, identifying the individual who had driven her to despair. Promptly, Alejandro and Marcella reported Martin Pradenas to the police, suspecting him of exploitation. There was little known about him. He was born and lived in Temuco, Chile, the same city as Antonia. He came from a large family, parents, a sister, and a brother. The dynamics within his family are unclear, as there is scant information available online, which is justified later. Undoubtedly, in his early youth, a young woman named Daniela Alvarez bore his child. Nonetheless, the relationship between the two did not last long. After the birth, the couple parted ways. Detectives discovered that between 2015 and 2017, Antonia and Martin communicated via a social network. At that time, Antonia was a teenager. They exchanged messages and commented on each other's photos, though their interactions were confined to the digital realm. However, they eventually met in person, which unfortunately led to a tragic outcome. Antonia was born in the late 1980s into a strong and close-knit family. The Barra family home was large and spacious, suited to a family of their size. Loving parents Alejandro and Marcella raised 5 children, 4 daughters and 1 son. It was a household where care and attention were plentiful. The children were kind and well-behaved, causing no significant trouble. However, Antonia stood out among her siblings. She was unusually perceptive, responsible, and ambitious from a young age, which made her a particular source of pride for her parents. She excelled in school, got along well with her teachers, and had plans for her future. Antonia dreamed of traveling and leading a fulfilling life. After graduating high school, she got into her university of choice and began studying a highly sought-after major. As a freshman, she immersed herself in mastering the basics of her future profession and actively participated in academic and social activities, making new friends. Her friends shared her interests and aspirations. Antonia formed an especially close bond with Consuela Uribe, who was studying at the law school. The friends would often go out, shop, and attend parties together. They became very close. Thus, when Antonia broke up with her boyfriend Rodrigo, Consuela suggested she distract herself from the heartbreak. Antonia was struggling with the breakup, so she embraced her friend's idea. She wanted to clear her mind and temporarily forget the past. The friends planned a trip for Chile's Independence Day on September 18th. Their destination was the tourist town of Pucón. By sheer coincidence, it was there that Martin and Antonia's paths crossed again. Martin was planning to attend an electronic music festival. The event was to be held at a local club called Black Room, where a DJ friend of his was performing. On September 17th, around 6:30 p.m., Uribe and Barra set off for Pucón with 3 other friends, one of whom was Consuela's boyfriend. The journey went smoothly, and upon arrival, the young people stayed in different accommodations. The girls stayed in a summer house owned by the Urad family. After 8 p.m., the friends began preparing for a party at the popular venue, Black Room. The night promised a sea of unforgettable emotions. Before leaving, Antonia exchanged messages with her father, who asked her to be careful and cautious around strangers. In response, she reassured her father, writing that prudence was her foremost trait. Law enforcement officials repeatedly interviewed Martin Pradenas, but he denied any wrongdoing regarding Antonia. He claimed their intimacy was consensual and vehemently denied any involvement in her tragic end. However, detectives had their own perspective and evidence regarding the matter. During the investigation, it was established that Martin left Temuco on September 17th, around noon, accompanied by friends. They planned to return the next day. Upon reaching their destination, the group held a party at a rented house, filled with conversation, jokes, and of course, alcohol. Meanwhile, Antonia and Consuela got ready and headed to the club. There, they ordered a table, food, and drinks. The friends enjoyed themselves, chatting and dancing extensively. Needless to say, the Black Room Club became the venue for the young people's unexpected reunion. The chance meeting delighted them, and the man and woman spent the evening together, chatting and dancing. It was clear they were fond of each other. Antonia occasionally left him to return to her friend, who was also enjoying herself, and to greet the male acquaintances with whom she had traveled. Moving from one bar to another, she didn't realize how carried away she got with the alcohol, likely due to the long drive and an empty stomach, something she usually did not allow herself to do. Around 6:45 a.m., Consuela found her friend pleasantly chatting with a mutual acquaintance, Emilio. At that point, she told Antonia it was time to leave. Antonia refused, feeling good and wanting to continue the evening. Her friend advised her to stop drinking and reconsider her decision, but Antonia was adamant and chose to stay at the club while Consuela left. This turned out to be a regrettable decision for Antonia. Emilio became an unwitting witness to the events that unfolded afterwards, which he detailed during the investigation and in court. He noted that Martin approached Antonia and started a conversation with her. He then took her by the hand and led her towards the exit. Emilio remarked that Antonia acted oddly, unsure whether she was engaging in the conversation or just confused due to the alcohol. Nevertheless, it seemed she did not mind being led away, or perhaps she was unaware of it. Emilio assumed that the man had invited her to join him, and she agreed. Nonetheless, external surveillance footage told a different story. Martin's friends recounted that they left the club in 2 cars, but there was no room for the pair in either vehicle. Therefore, they proceeded on foot. Along the way, they came across a store. Surveillance footage made it clear that the man coerced the woman into entering. She could barely stand and was unable to resist. Martin, slightly more sober, was able to somewhat control the situation. Throughout the night, they were captured on camera several times. Along the way, Pradenas was overly affectionate and tried to kiss his companion, who did not reciprocate and tried to pull away. Upon entering the rented house, none of his friends paid much attention to the woman. Only 19-year-old Barbara, who had joined recently and hadn't been drinking, noticed that the couple was intoxicated. Afterward, they went upstairs. Around 9 a.m., Consuela received a voice message from her friend. Initially, she couldn't make out what was being said. After listening more carefully, she understood a few words. Antonia was pleading to be picked up. Since her friend didn't know her exact location, she used GPS to find it. Consuela, accompanied by her boyfriend Jose, went to the designated location. Upon entering the house, they were met by a naked Martin, who was covering himself with a pillow. When Consuela asked him where her friend was, he claimed he didn't know. They found Barra in one of the upstairs rooms, lying on a bed in her underwear, quietly crying. Jose picked her up and carried her to the car. Consuela asked what had happened, but Antonia could only cry. The young couple tried to console her, hugging and attempting to engage her in conversation. Back at the summer house, Antonia confessed everything. Martin had exploited her against her will, and she felt powerless to stop it. Her memories were hazy. She couldn't recall much, but one thing was clear. He had wronged her. This occurred when they went upstairs. Afterwards, he left her alone and disappeared. Upon hearing about the incident, Jose and Consuela insisted that Antonia report the scoundrel to the police and seek justice. However, she refused, fearing that her parents and the public would find out. She chose to quietly endure the trauma and try to recover on her own. She asked them to tell no one about the incident. During this heartfelt conversation, Antonia received a message from her father asking how she was doing and joking about whether she had been drinking too much. To avoid arousing suspicion, she tried to respond in her usual manner, thereby inadvertently highlighting her own intentions. The next day, Antonia met with Martin to talk. However, he was dismissive and arrogant. He insisted that the events of the previous night had been consensual. At that point, Antonia realized that she would not hear the truth or receive an apology. She knew she had to try to move on. Later, psychotherapists invited to the court hearing will explain that at the time, Antonia was experiencing intimacy trauma syndrome. It's characterized by disruptions in physical, emotional, cognitive, and interpersonal behavior. This condition can appear immediately following the incident or even months, and sometimes years later. The poor girl was suffering through an acute stage alone. She could not rid herself of distressing sensations, distraction, anxiety, confusion, alternating with hysterics and crying. She undoubtedly felt a compulsive desire to cleanse herself, experiencing bouts of nausea or even vomiting. For 3 weeks, Barra kept silent and tried to behave as usual. A childhood friend confessed that she noticed nothing unusual about her. However, her classmates could not overlook the memory impairments and disorganization associated with the syndrome. One of them remarked on her declining academic performance, which was very uncharacteristic of the once disciplined student. When asked what was the cause, Antonia cited poor health. It should be noted that a large number of witnesses came to the girl's defense during the trial: friends, acquaintances, and classmates. But what was the turning point in making a fateful decision? Perhaps Antonia would have remained alive, sought professional help over time, had it not been for a series of events. Somehow, her terrible secret became known to an ex-boyfriend. However, the information reached him in a very unflattering form, which he hurried to report. The girl replied that she was not at fault for what had happened. The information he had was a gross exaggeration. Then Rodrigo did not believe her. Moreover, the day before the incident, Martin called. It is unclear what the conversation between them entailed, possibly threats from his side. One thing is clear: the next day the girl was gone. A few hours before her death, she sent a farewell message to her boyfriend, and in a family chat, she shared a childhood video. In it, Antonia was dancing and laughing joyfully, showing how much she missed her former self. She could not return to her previous way of life, thoughts, and actions. This tragedy made a deep impression. Thanks to Alejandro finding the strength to share his daughter's story nationwide, her tragedy resonated with the public. Antonia's name was written on posters, in social media hashtags, even on building walls. Public support had an incredible result. In less than a week, women came forward with similar claims against Pradenas. 6 new charges were filed against his name, reporting actions he took from 2010 to 2019. The man turned out to be a criminal and was taken into custody. Concurrently, Martin's family petitioned to protect their personal information, which had leaked online. The family asserted that their constitutional right to honor and respect for private life was violated, citing numerous insults, aggressive messages, and fake information online. In these actions, the Pradenas family suspected, including the Barra family. On June 12, 2020, the Temuco court granted their request. The judge required Antonia's relatives to refrain from disclosing information about the assailant's family through social media and from making compromising publications. This decision sparked outrage. Chileans were extremely upset, believing that it protected Martin. On July 21st, the Barra family filed an appeal with the Supreme Court, but it was rejected. Later that month, the suspect's lawyer submitted a petition for protective measures concerning his client. In the same month, he was officially charged with several attacks. Public outcry was gaining momentum. In Chile, the investigation became known as the Antonia case, a symbol of justice restoration for victims of violence. Many women, after many years, dared to come forward about their experiences. On July 22nd, an unexpected event occurred. The court changed the previously decided preventive measure from detention to house arrest. Martin Pradenas was effectively set free. At the same time, the judge explained that this in no way summarizes the presumed punishment. Meanwhile, the prosecutor charged Martin with 5 instances of misconduct, but the court only acknowledged 2. Massive protests swept across the country. Thousands of people took to the streets, outraged by the cessation of investigations regarding certain facts and the decision on house arrest. The authorities supported the citizens by sending a request to the appeals court. The judiciary responded immediately. It revoked the selected preventive measure and took Martin into custody. The same court later eliminated the statute of limitations for 2 cases of intimate violence. Concurrently, Alejandro, along with feminist organizations, worked on drafting a bill that would establish punishments for such crimes. He emphasized that no one should remain indifferent when a woman is led away by a man without resisting, especially while intoxicated. Barra stressed the importance of taking necessary measures in such cases, as this state makes a woman a potential victim. The investigation continued. In February 2021, Martin's phone was found. Forensic analysis revealed it contained photos in which the accused displayed women's underwear. He was clearly proud of his conquests and apparently kept account. The police report ran nearly 400 pages, including statements from victims and witnesses, people close to both Martin and Antonia, and those who had known them since childhood. The accused's childhood teacher recounted that Pradenas was a smart and cheerful child, but was very interested in topics related to intimacy. Some women recalled that when they were little, he touched them. At the time, however, no one thought much of it, as they were all children. On June 14, 2022, the criminal court in Temuco commenced its hearings, which were expected to last over a month. During this period, the prosecution presented a series of evidence, expert testimonies, and witness statements. The disclosed video footage clearly showed that Antonia was unable to control the situation. On August 26th, Martin was sentenced to 20 years of imprisonment for crimes against intimacy and acts of intimacy-related aggression. On December 29th, the Supreme Court accepted the defense's appeal, disagreeing with the verdict. A new trial was scheduled for spring 2023. Meanwhile, the efforts of the Barra family have an effect. The drafting of Antonia's law began, enhancing existing legislation to ensure that anyone committing an act of violence that pushed the victim to end their own life would be inevitably punished with imprisonment. On March 16th, the defendant's legal team resigned, and his case was taken over by public defense. Finally, on April 24, 2024, the second trial commenced for 5 cases of violence and 2 cases of forcible intimacy. During this time, Pradenas waived his right to remain silent and explained the events. He claimed that his crimes were committed under severe alcohol intoxication, to which the prosecutor responded that by drinking with the women, he made the victims vulnerable. On July 7, 2023, the man was found guilty. The federal prosecution demanded a sentence of 41 years in prison. On July 28, 2023, 31-year-old Martin Pradenas was sentenced to 17 years in prison for 7 intimacy-related offenses committed against 6 victims. Considering the time already spent in custody, he would serve 14 years. The tragedy that befell Antonia Barra helped expose a dangerous offender. It's unknown how many more innocent women might have suffered from his actions. The line between harassment and flirtation is very thin. One can never be prepared for someone deciding to cross that perilous line. However, the societal changes that have occurred have altered the perception of victims of violence. Now everyone understands the risks of uncontrolled desires and the inability to control oneself. Ultimately, the body and soul of another person are as fragile as a crystal vase, thus precious and inviolable. Before starting the story, I want to apologize for my bad English. I am not a native speaker. However, I am trying my best for you guys. Thanks for your understanding. It's pretty exciting to admit to your parents the decision to play your own wedding. Tina Thomas was a lot more nervous than her fiancé, Gabe Watson. Tina was 26 years old at the time, just like her future husband, and this was her 3rd serious relationship and 2nd attempt at a wedding. Her first attempt to build a family with boyfriend Scott McCulloch ended in failure. No, the relationship between young people were just fine, but only Tina's mother was against this wedding, and Scott himself she did not like. There were no specific claims, but like every mother, she wanted a better and happier life for her daughter, and Tina herself, at that moment, was still very young. For this reason, the couple soon parted. The mirage of a joint future melted away. The second attempt, with Stan Marks, also failed. Here, Tina's parents did not play any role. The couple could not overcome the first 3-year crisis, and they parted by mutual consent. Finally, on Christmas Eve, at a party of friends, Tina meets Gabe Watson. We can't say it was love at first sight, on the contrary. The relationship was built more as mutual support for each other after a recent breakup. Yes, perhaps this is not the most joyful reason to start building a new relationship, but 2 years later, Gabe proposed marriage to Tina. Tina, having learned from bitter experience, said she agreed, but couldn't do it without parental blessing. In 2003, Gabe decided, like a real prince, beautifully and romantically appealed to the parents of his chosen one and chose Valentine's Day. But Tina's father was away, so the dinner was moved to the next day. On February 15th, during the dinner, when Watson voiced his decision to live with Tina all his life hand in hand, the father of the bride asked a seemingly simple question to the groom. "Does he love Tina?" Gabe stammered like a schoolboy but never answered. His father considered this reaction to be a common embarrassment among strangers. Then he asked his daughter the same question. Surprisingly, Tina did not answer this question directly either, but began her speech by saying that she was afraid of being alone at the age of 26. The father thought for a while and blessed the young ones. Preparing for a wedding takes a lot of time and effort, and while Tina was thinking about her outfit, her guests, and the whole wedding, Gabe was only planning the honeymoon. He didn't care at all how his future wife wanted to spend her vacation. He had already decided everything for her. His plan was to go to the Great Barrier Reef, which is located in the Pacific Ocean near Australia, and go diving there. First of all, to look at the sunken ship, the Townsville Titanic, which sank back in 1911. The problem was that Tina, unlike Gabe, wasn't into diving. Yes, he took her scuba diving in the pool sometimes, in calm water under the supervision of lifeguards, but no more than that. Gabe, himself, was an experienced scuba diver. He was completing a rescue diving course and had over 50 dives to his credit at the time, and of course it wasn't in a pool. "If you don't learn to dive by our honeymoon, I'm warning you right away. You're staying home, walking the dog, or pruning roses in the garden. You're not going anywhere with me," said Gabe. Tina had no choice. In fact, Gabe even took out a loan to buy her own equipment and pay for her fiancé's classes. The first instructor Tina had taken lessons with was disappointed in her skills and even warned Gabe that his fiancée had absolutely no skills for open ocean swimming. A furious Gabe wouldn't listen to the diving instructor, accusing him of being the one who couldn't explain and refused to continue the class. The second instructor rather quickly gave Tina a credit, although then, and noted that Tina does everything from under the stick, solely to please her future husband. On October 11th, the young couple finally got married, and after 2 days, Tina and Gabe flew to Australia, spending on a trip of $10,000 which gave them for the wedding. It should be noted that Gabe devoted part of the honeymoon to Tina. They walked around Sydney, visited the Sydney Aquarium and the zoo. Tina was excited, but the closer they got to going to the Great Barrier Reef, the sadder she became. On the morning of October 21st, they flew to Townsville, and in the evening boarded a boat to one of the most beautiful places on Earth and every diver's dream. After a while, employees of the diving company will tell that in fact, the couple did not look like experienced divers, and even Gabe, who had graduated from courses and had experience behind him, could hardly understand the equipment, as if he saw it for the first time in his life. But nevertheless, it was he who helped Tina to pass the exam before diving, although such a test should be conducted separately, and when the instructor offered Tina his help underwater, she refused. It was also noted in the dive log that there was a strong current that day, and this moment in history should not be missed or glossed over. Gabe, as I said, helped his wife sort out the equipment they had bought back in the US and went to get the tanks they had to rent. Gabe took an 11-liter tank for himself and gave his wife an 8.5-liter tank, which for this place was an extremely small volume or even dangerous, given Tina's experience, or rather lack thereof. It was not possible to descend to the Townsville Titanic from the first time. Tina asked for additional cargo because she could not dive to depth, and Gabe at first did not work underwater computer, which calculates the necessary speed of diving and ascent, as well as shows the amount of oxygen in the cylinders. After returning to the boat, the computer worked and they tried again. The wreck was 49 feet deep, and Tina was the first to submerge, Gabe swimming behind her. From Gabe's statement, "At first everything was fine. At some point Tina stopped, started waving at me, and later signaled that she wanted to go up. I realized right away that she was just panicking. She used to do that. By this time we were halfway up, so I decided to calm her down and stay with her at the same depth for a while, without further diving, so that she could psychologically get used to the pressure. She continued to breathe very deeply, which was unsafe, and that's when I noticed she was sinking. I tried to grab her belt to hold her down, but she swung her arms so hard that she knocked the mask off my face. While I was putting the mask back on my face, though it didn't take long, Tina was already too far away from me. For a while I tried to swim to her, but I was unsuccessful. Then I decided to return to the surface to ask for help from the lifeguards. On the way, I met another swimmer with a narrow-set eye, but he paid no attention to my signs for help. Yes, there were 2 Asian men with them at depth, but neither of them confirmed Gabe's words about his request for help. Later, when the police took underwater computer readings, they confirmed that Gabe did try to swim after his drowning wife for a while, but eventually gave up the attempt very quickly. Although the ascent to the surface itself was not an emergency, on the contrary, Gabe surfaced as instructed, stopping at each required depth level. As for the other divers, each of them, when questioned by police, claimed that Gabe could have saved his wife, but he simply did not. In addition, this tragic incident occurred at the very beginning of their dive, and therefore Gabe had enough oxygen in his tanks to swim to the bottom and return back to the surface. The rescuers on duty on the ship, as soon as they realized what had happened, immediately went in search of Tina and found her very quickly. But unfortunately, it was too late. Tina was lying on her back, with her eyes open under her mask, at a depth of 82 feet. Her body was immediately lifted up, and on the deck of the yacht, they gave her artificial respiration for about 40 minutes. But to no avail, Tina died. Gabe all this time did not come close to his wife, but only stood somewhere aside, and according to witnesses, naively sniffed his nose. The same employees of the company said that the young man on the way to the shore and smiled and even played cards with other passengers. Gabe denied this in court. The subsequent autopsy of Tina showed that not everything was so clear. Yes, there are no signs of obvious violent death, but there are bruises on the neck. There are traces of blood in the nostrils, which is also common at the 82-foot depth where Tina's body was found. There are no traces of alcohol in the blood, but there are high levels of drugs such as ibuprofen and paracetamol, although these drugs are used in the treatment of seasickness. A small amount of fluid was seen in the lungs. The report stated that Tina died from drowning, but it is possible that she drowned while already deprived of oxygen. Tina's gear was checked by the Australian Water Police, but no malfunctions were noted. The police could have written it off as an accident. An inexperienced diver ignored safety rules and paid for it with his life. A very common case, unfortunately. But only there were suspicious moments in this story, such as rather ambiguous results of the autopsy. Also, according to the diving team, strange behavior of Watson, which does not fit into the conventional picture, where the husband grieves for his wife who just died. All these factors did not give so easily close the case. And that's why the investigation was taking quite a long time. Gabe realized the detectives were digging for him. In addition, Tina's parents did not want to accept what had happened as a tragic accident and wanted to see their son-in-law in the dock. If not as the murderer of their daughter, then at least as a man who had not helped her. During the first interrogation, the police noted that the suspect was in shock, crying and laughing, twitching nervously, asking to call his father, who complained of pain in his ears, and begging him to tell his wife's parents about the tragedy. Late at night, Gabe was released. He went to the yacht that belonged to the company that sent them to the reef and asked them for a night's lodging, arguing that the trip was supposed to last 2 days, but because his wife had died, they had only been there for 24 hours. He also asked for a refund of half of the cost of their dive. In fact, he never got to see the sunken ship. On October 24th, Gabe's mother flies to Townsville to support her son and help him find a lawyer. That same day, at Gabe's request, they go to the morgue. Gabe wanted to see his wife one more time. Because the husband was still considered a suspect, the morgue employee called the detective who was in charge of the case. In theory, Gabe could have hidden some evidence, but the grief-stricken husband only cried, held his wife's cold hand and begged her forgiveness, not realizing at all that the police officer was standing outside the door at the time, recording him on a tape recorder. "I didn't mean to hurt you." These are the words Detective Lawrence later uses against Gabe in court. Then at the morgue, "You told Tina you didn't mean to hurt her. What did you mean by that?" Lawrence will ask his question. The story of Gabe's sore ear was repeated again as he was traveling home with his wife's body. During a layover in Oakland, he sought medical attention on the airport grounds and was held there for evaluation. According to the investigation, this was done on purpose to avoid seeing Tina's father. However, and divers will confirm this, ear problems are a fairly common ailment among divers. Tina's funeral was held on November 5th, where Gabe still had to meet with the deceased's father. Gabe, almost in full view of everyone, took off his wife's wedding ring, putting it on his ring finger over hers, as well as earrings, which he immediately handed over to his father-in-law. Watson and the Thomas family never crossed paths again that day. Later in the trial, Gabe would be asked the question, "Did you really take your wife's jewelry off during the funeral?" Gabe will only smile and shrug. "I don't think I could have done it later." Everyone had different opinions about Gabe. Some said that this chubby, funny man was quite a kind man, and some, on the contrary, called him a tyrant and a despot. But they all agreed on one thing. Gabe and Tina were not happy, or at least they didn't seem to be. Tina's friends confirmed what she'd told her father at a family dinner on February 15th. Her union with Gabe was just a way to avoid dying alone, and that fear had led Tina to die on the seabed. Also, the victim, who died shortly before their honeymoon, confessed to a friend that her husband dragged her by the hand to an insurance company where he forced her to insure his life at a higher interest rate in case of death and put his name in the column beneficiary. This testimony was checked through the insurance agent, and he confirmed everything. The cab driver who drove the newlyweds to the yacht was also questioned. Tina cried the whole way, but her husband paid no attention to her. Finally, Tina's friend Amanda Phillips told another story, and it became clear what the couple's relationship was really like. This damn jerk videotaped Tina urinating in the bathroom and then edited it and put it in a tape of them celebrating Christmas. That would have been okay, but he turned it on at a general viewing with a full house of guests. He laughed like a horse, while everyone twiddled their fingers around their temples and tried to explain to him that it was a very low act. I was clutching crosses on my fingers so Tina wouldn't get the idea to marry him. While removing jewelry right during a funeral may seem like a frightening and denunciatory act on Gabe's part, during the trial, in 2008, the jury was shown an extremely disturbing footage of Watson visiting Tina's grave, taking all the flowers from it and carrying them away. They were later found in a nearby trash can. Tina's father noticed the missing flowers, and to find out the thief, he set up a hidden camera in the next row among the monuments, but he never expected to see Gabe on the tape and was outraged by such an act. In court, Gabe's defense was that he and his wife had discussed the death of one of their own on an extreme honeymoon, and the lack of flowers on the grave was her request, which sounded very strange and unlikely. There's no telling how long the search for evidence would have dragged on if the cops had put on the exact same gear the newlyweds had and hadn't tried to stage that incident. Gabe said Tina drowned while he was trying to put a mask on her face. It turned out it was impossible to put the mask on underwater by yourself unless you used another source of air, in this case, Tina's oxygen. In late November 2008, the Australian police arrested Gabe, and on June 5, 2009, Gabe's trial began, where he pleaded guilty, but only to failing to save his wife, so he was charged with negligent homicide and sent to prison for 18 months. After completing his sentence, Gabe returned home to the U.S., but a year later, the now U.S. court charged him with first-degree murder, the motive for which was to receive insurance payments after the death of his wife. Gabe's lawyer tried to defend his client, shifting all the blame on the diving company, that the employees of this company did not take care of the safety of tourists, and now, afraid of losing their license, and therefore the whole business, are trying to shift the blame on the unhappy husband who has already served his time in another country. As for the money received from the insurance company, the payout amounted to $33,000, while Gabe spent much more money on lawyers and additional expertise. Nevertheless, the prosecution continued to insist that this spending was only because the husband could not assume that he would not be believed, and also the prosecutor refused to accept the fact that Gabe, with a degree in drowning rescue in hand, could not even save his wife. When Gabe had his say, he addressed the jury. "It's been 7 years since the tragedy, and there hasn't been a day that I haven't thought about that terrible day. The public has pounced on me, blaming me for my wife's death, calling me a murderer. There wasn't a single person who looked me in the eye and said, 'Yes, I understand how bad you feel, but it's not your fault.' On the contrary, everyone just wants me dead. And here I can only understand my late wife's parents. Yes, they will never forgive me, no matter how much I kneel before them, and no matter how much I beg their forgiveness. You often hear the phrase, 'I can't imagine what it's like to lose a child,' but I've never heard anyone say, 'I can't imagine what it's like to lose a wife, especially on a honeymoon.' If I can be accused of anything, it's that I didn't make enough effort to save Tina, but I've already received my punishment for that. Perhaps you all would have been satisfied if I had drowned with my wife then, 7 years ago. But I was afraid to die, afraid I wouldn't be able to rise from the bottom to the top. I just wanted to live, as I still want to live now." No evidence of Gabe's guilt was presented to the court. The jury found Gabe not guilty. What do you guys think? Is Gabe guilty of Tina's death? A wedding is one of the most eagerly anticipated and heartfelt events in every woman's life. But not all dreams of happiness end with the fairy tale ending of, "They lived happily ever after and died on the same day." Today, we find ourselves in Somerset, England. This part of southwest England is famous for its well-preserved medieval castles, ancient towns, and legends of King Arthur. But these aren't the only legends that shroud the modern county. On the morning of September 12, 2012, a local resident named Orlando was rushing home after a long night shift at a gas station. He had promised his wife he would take their little daughter Maria to daycare. Loud music played in the car to keep him awake as trees along the road swiftly passed by one after another. Coming out of a sharp turn, he saw black smoke. Orlando slowed down. Smoke was billowing from a nearby parking lot where a car was engulfed in flames. Orlando stopped, ran to take a closer look but couldn't get close because of the fire. 4 minutes later, when the firefighters arrived at the scene, the car was completely burnt out. The arriving police cordoned off the area with safety tape to keep the gathering onlookers at a distance. The place was quite deserted so early in the morning, and there were no witnesses nearby who could describe the incident's exact moment. Upon examining the scene, a charred body was discovered. The police had to identify the victim and determine the causes of this dreadful death. There were no signs of a car accident or skid marks found nearby. Likewise, no tire tread marks from another vehicle were found. A car self-ignition or spontaneous combustion due to malfunctions became the police's initial theory. A lengthy investigation and multiple expert analyses were ahead. The remains were transported to the forensic laboratory to determine the identity and cause of death of the deceased. Fragments of the burned vehicle were also delivered to the forensic laboratory to identify any malfunctions and establish the cause of the fire. The police began their investigation by checking the missing persons database and recent reports of disappearances. Forensic experts quickly identified the deceased. She was a 23-year-old local resident, Katherine Barra. On the same day, a report of a missing person was filed by Raphael Novak concerning the disappearance of the young woman. According to Raphael Novak's report, he left for work at 5:30 a.m., while his girlfriend, Katherine, was still sleeping soundly at home. Although they worked for the same company, his shift started 2 hours earlier. When Katherine did not show up for work after this time, and Raphael couldn't find her at any of her relatives, he contacted the police. The investigation commenced. The police interviewed the victim's parents and sister, as well as Raphael Novak, who reported her missing, and all her colleagues and friends. Gradually, by piecing together information about the last days and, subsequently, the years of the young woman's life, they managed to reconstruct a sequence of events that led to her tragic demise. Katherine Barra was born in 1989 to Phil and Jane Barra in the United Kingdom. She was the second child in her family, with an older sister named Lynn. During the summer of 2010, while on a university break, Katherine met one of the employees, 31-year-old Raphael Novak, on a new vacuum cleaner production line. The tall, ruggedly handsome blonde quickly caught Katherine's eye. He was an immigrant from Poland, with a former wife and son back home. About 4 years prior, he had moved to England in search of a better life. Katherine and Raphael soon started dating. Initially, they met for lunch at the cafe on the production site, but these lunches quickly turned into romantic dinners. Raphael courted Katherine beautifully, gifting her lovely bouquets, taking her to movies, and going for walks. Raphael opened up to Katherine, sharing his past life and reasons for moving to the UK. Katherine's trusting heart let the blonde man in completely. Their relationship progressed so swiftly that within a few months, Katherine introduced Raphael to her parents. They joyfully welcomed their daughter's choice into the family, hopeful for the couple's future happiness. Soon, the lovers were planning their wedding. In 2011, Katherine graduated with honors from Bath Spa University and landed a promising job as a business analyst at Pneumatic International, the company that manufactures Henry vacuum cleaners. She quickly advanced in her career, providing good job opportunities for her parents and sister. Katherine was intelligent and well-educated. She always knew how to approach people, was concerned with her colleagues' problems, and was very attentive to those around her. Her kind gaze and radiant smile endeared her to people who held the young leader in high regard. Katherine Wells Barr's career was on a fast track to success. Her substantial earnings, combined with those of her partner, Raphael Novak, allowed them to purchase a spacious home with a terrace in Willow Way. Despite their financial well-being, the house was bought on a mortgage, for which the young couple secured insurance coverage as per their agreement with the bank. Youth, successful careers, and love. It seemed they had everything needed for happiness. Yet the fateful day of September 12, 2012, marked a dividing line in their lives, changing everything from before to after. The investigation pressed on, uncovering new and unfamiliar facts about the lives of Katherine and Raphael. Over time, the veil of deceit that had enveloped their relationship from the start began to lift. 29-year-old Raphael Novak left behind a wife and child in Poland, fleeing to escape significant debts. He relocated to the UK, where he met Anna Lagvinovich. Since 2008, they maintained a close relationship. Then Katherine came into the picture. For a while, Raphael saw both women, but ultimately, he chose Katherine Wells Barr, seeing her as a more viable option for a family and financial stability. While Katherine genuinely dreamed of a happy marriage with the man she loved and starting a family, Novak was plotting a scheme to end her life, intending to leave himself and his mistress, Anna Lagvinovich, with the life insurance payout and the large house, a significant portion of the funds for which had been contributed by Katherine. The plot of this crime was meticulously planned and executed with even greater cruelty and cold-bloodedness. On the day of her disappearance, after waiting a few hours, Raphael approached Katherine's boss to inquire about her whereabouts. He feigned sincere panic and despair in front of Katherine's colleagues and relatives. Katherine was not found at her parents' home, nor at her own. Her car was missing as well. Raphael recalled that she had been receiving threatening letters from a certain mentally unstable admirer for some time. Following this, her family contacted the police. The family was in the living room of the young couple's house, awaiting her return, when they were informed that a burning car with a body inside had been found. Raphael mentioned that the evening before her disappearance was entirely normal. The couple had gone for a walk after work, stopped by a store for groceries, had dinner, and then went to bed together after watching some television. Katherine did not appear scared or disturbed. However, a more detailed investigation proved that her death occurred earlier. Katherine was strangled around 2 a.m., likely in her own bed while she was sleeping. Her lifeless body was then placed in the car, taken a short distance from the house, and callously set on fire in an attempt to destroy evidence. Yet Raphael Novak had a solid alibi. He was at work from 5:30 a.m., and according to him, Katherine was asleep in bed when he left. The burning car was discovered between 6 and 7 a.m. However, Raphael was still at home at 1:30 a.m., significantly altering the case's direction. Thus, Raphael Novak became the prime suspect in the murder of Katherine Wells Barr. Evidence allowed for Novak to be detained pending further investigation. Raphael claimed that Katherine was being pursued by a stalker who had repeatedly written to her and driven her to hysteria. During the investigation, it was revealed that Katherine indeed had accounts on several adult websites, indicating a hidden side of her life unknown to her close ones. Intimate photos and flirtatious exchanges with men were found, along with a letter from a secret admirer. However, no matter how long you try to twist the truth, it always comes to light. In an attempt to mislead the investigation and direct it towards a false trail, Raphael forgot to destroy the evidence proving his direct involvement in Katherine's demise. Importantly, this provided the prosecution with a motive. Upon examining Novak's phone, investigators discovered that he never ceased communication and meetings with Anna Lagvinovich. They actively met over the last few months. Additionally, it was found that the man had a financial interest as well, as shortly before Katherine's demise, they both insured their lives for a sum of £123,000. Katherine and Raphael were the sole beneficiaries of the insurance contracts and recipients of the payouts for each other. The receipt of a substantial life insurance sum emerged as the primary motive in the case regarding Katherine's demise and the arson of her car to confuse the investigation. Police discovered that on the day of her disappearance, Katherine sent a message to Anna Lagvinovich's phone. Also, surveillance cameras revealed that a few days before the crime, Anna, along with a relative, her uncle, filled a full canister of gasoline at a gas station. Thus, a third party became involved in the case. 32-year-old Anna Lagvinovich and her 38-year-old uncle Tadeusz Dmitrushin became suspects in the complicity of intentional crime and arson to conceal evidence. The crime was meticulously planned over several months by the trio. They prepared thoroughly for the act, creating accounts on pornographic websites, uploading photoshopped images of Katherine, and fabricating and saving exchanges with various men, all to lead the investigation astray with a false trail. They didn't resist the irrefutable evidence for long. When Raphael and Anna realized it was futile to deny any longer, they started blaming each other. The man insisted that Anna, out of jealousy, devised and executed the plan to eliminate a rival. In contrast, she accused Novak of committing the crime out of greed, aiming to secure the insurance payout in the house. In an attempt to avoid exposure, the conspirators wove a web of heartless lies around an honest and joyful young woman. They posted her fake profiles on websites used by people looking for casual, intimate encounters. The conspirators went to great lengths to conceal their crime, not only setting her body ablaze but also fabricating a completely false backstory for her. They aimed to portray Katherine as a promiscuous woman, full of secrets and desires. They convincingly created the image of a mysterious lover who could have ended her life. One of the conspirators sent a text message from Wellsbar's phone at 5:17 a.m. on the day of her demise to this fictitious man, suggesting she was headed to meet him. However, forensic experts determined that when the fire started in the car, Katherine was wearing only her favorite nightgown, not the outfit she would have chosen for a meeting with a man. They discovered a pillow was missing from her bed, and the only pillowcase had been washed and was hanging on a clothesline, leaving the police to believe she was suffocated. In Anna Lagvinovich's car, detectives found a SIM card linked to the number Katherine was supposed to have texted that morning. In Lagvinovich's apartment trash bin, they found notes she had written, seeking inspiration for messages supposedly sent by the mysterious person. As soon as Novak and Lagvinovich realized the game was up, they both claimed that Katherine's demise was the act of a hired criminal. A week before the trial began, Lagvinovich asked a fellow inmate to secretly pass on a fake confession from an imaginary hitman who claimed Novak paid him £20,000 sterling to end Katherine's life. The story penned by Lagvinovich might have offered a chilling insight into what happened to their victim. According to this fictional hitman, Katherine's body was in the trunk of the car. Novak was very pleased that he ended Katherine's life. The supposed hitman wrote, "I helped him place her in the driver's seat." Novak removed the tape from her mouth and put on her shoes. He buckled her seatbelt and kissed her goodbye. At 6 a.m., I approached Katherine's car and, following Novak's instructions, set it on fire. Raphael Novak played the role of a loving boyfriend perfectly in the days leading up to Katherine's demise, holding hands and kissing her in front of family members. He told her mother, Jane, "I've lost my world. I've lost my future." Raphael Novak refused to acknowledge his involvement in the young woman's death and went further, telling her mother, Jane Wellsbar, that her daughter was receiving emails and text messages from an ex-boyfriend who said if he couldn't have her, no one could. To complete the narrative, he even claimed she spoke of taking her own life. Worse still, Novak let the distraught Wellsbar parents comfort him, who believed he was also mourning the young woman he loved. Raphael's acting was so convincing that Katherine's mother, Jane, hugged him after her death and allowed him to call her Mom. She said that after the police told her in the early days of the investigation that he was seen more as a witness than a suspect, she decided to offer him all the support possible. "I thought if Katherine loved him that much and he was part of our family, then he deserved to come back." The lengthy trial commenced under the chairmanship of Justice Sharp. The jury heard during the trial that the three defendants hoped to receive a life insurance payout of £123,000 sterling and half ownership of a two-bedroom home in Mangold, Somerset, valued at £137,000 sterling, following Katherine Wellsbar's death. The court was told that Raphael Novak showed no emotion when police discovered the woman's body in her burned car on the morning of September 12th. Anna Lagvinovich, who often shook her head and laughed on the defendant's bench when Novak suggested she was responsible for the crime, refused to take the witness stand. Dmitry Sheen also did not testify in his defense during the trial. Sharp told the defendants that the murder was a terrible, merciless crime, cold-bloodedly committed with a gross breach of trust. None of the three showed any emotion during the sentencing. Judge Justice Sharp sentenced the three Polish nationals to mandatory life sentences with a minimum of 32 years in prison without the possibility of early release. "You took the life of a beautiful young woman who had everything to live for, all for money," Sharp said. "Raphael Novak, the photos of you holding Katherine's hand the evening before her death, buying groceries for what you knew was her last dinner, are utterly chilling. Your emotions were directed only at yourself. Anna Lagvinovich, your behavior was deceitful, manipulative, and cruel. You played your full part in this horrendous crime. And you, Hadeevs Dmitrishin, it was a murder for gain. There were substantial aggravating circumstances and no mitigating circumstances." The judge continued, "Many tears have been shed in this court, but the only tears anyone should shed are for Katherine and her family, her mother Jane, father Philip, and sister Lynn." The judge expressed heartfelt sympathy for Katherine's parents. They could never have known that behind the facade presented to them by Raphael Novak was a person devoid of remorse and decency. "It was all about the money," the judge said. "Novak and Katherine had no ties binding them. They were not married, nor did they have children. The crime against Katherine was motivated by money, selfishness, and greed, while in the case of Anna Lagvinovich, it stemmed from jealousy and a desire for revenge." At the request of the parents, Judge Justice Sharp read statements from Katherine's mother and sister. Her mother wept in the courtroom as her statement was read. It said, "Katherine was a caring, loving, sincere, generous, loyal, thoughtful, exceptional, and amazing young woman. She had a bright and promising future with so much potential. As her parents, Phil and I were immensely proud of the young woman she had become." The manner of Katherine's passing, a cruel, calculated act of villainy, and the hatred shown to her, will haunt us for the rest of our lives. I never got the chance to say goodbye, or tell her I love her, or for Katherine to say, "I love you, Mommy." Now, she considers Novak an evil person who should spend the rest of his life behind bars. Katherine's father, Philip, added, "We took him into our home. He became like a son and betrayed us all." During the trial, Raphael Novak, covered in tattoos, wept in the witness box, insisting he had no part in the demise of his true love. A father of one, who has a wife and a teenage son back in Poland, told the jurors, "Everyone is blaming me for something I never did." The court heard that Novak showed no emotion when the police discovered Katherine Welsbar's body in her burned car on the morning of September 12th last year. Her mother, Jane Welsbar, told the jurors that he didn't even mention Katherine, instead asking for a steak dinner after his initial release from police custody. Mrs. Welsbar said that as soon as they bought a house together and took out a life insurance policy, her daughter's fate was sealed. "I told the police her life had a bounty on it. Indeed, she had signed her own death warrant the moment she signed the mortgage. It was all over." Thus, 31-year-old Raphael Novak, a factory worker, was found guilty of the crime against his girlfriend, having suffocated her with a pillow while she slept. Afterward, he orchestrated a conspiracy with his secret lover and her uncle to claim a life insurance payout of £123,000 and a share in the house. His secret lover, 32-year-old Anna Lagvinovich, and her uncle, 38-year-old Tadeusz Dmitrishin, transported Welsbar's body in her car to a remote location and set it ablaze. It is believed that Lagvinovich and her uncle, 38-year-old Tadeusz Dmitrishin, who also lived in Taunton, took Welsbar's body in her Ford Focus to a remote location 7 miles from the city. They set the car on fire at 6 a.m., by which time Novak was already at work, providing him with a solid alibi. The jurors of the Royal Court of Bristol found Raphael Novak, Anna Lagvinovich, and Tadeusz Dmytryshyn, all originally from Poland, guilty of the crime. The crime was the culmination of months of secret meetings and phone calls between Rafał Nowak and his Polish lover, Anna Lagwinowicz, with Katherine completely unaware of her role in what turned out to be a love triangle. The accused spent months leading detectives on a false trail, creating fake profiles for the girl on adult websites, and sending her messages from a supposed mysterious lover. Following the verdict, the parents of the young woman who lost her life, Katherine Wells Barr, called for stricter immigration controls. Philip and Jane Wells Barr, who have separated after the tragic loss of their daughter, stated that Rafał Nowak, convicted of assaulting his wife in Poland, would not have been allowed entry into the UK if the immigration rules were as stringent as those in the United States of America. They blamed the European Union and stated that the UK needs to tighten its entry measures for foreign nationals. 46-year-old Jane Wells Barr said, "People coming into this country are not checked. We didn't know Rafał had been charged with assault when he was in Poland. I'm absolutely certain our government needs to wake up and stop allowing such negative elements like Rafał Nowak to roam freely in the country." Family members of Katherine Wells Barr wept in court as the sentence was announced. The three perpetrators showed no emotion. The criminal trio received life sentences without the possibility of parole. Now they have their whole lives ahead to ponder over criminal schemes, but without any chance to put them into practice. Thus, through their own efforts, the Polish immigrants traded their dreams of a successful and wealthy life for free prison cells. After the verdict was announced, the victim's mother spoke her final words, describing her daughter. "She was a beautiful girl, absolutely beautiful. We were so proud when she earned a first-class degree from the University of Bath Spa. She was determined, hard-working, beautiful. We don't know how to go on without her. She had so much to live for. She had such great potential. She had so much for a happy life. But she was robbed, her life taken away. We were robbed."